All right, we will call to order the September 12th meeting of the Stillwater Planning Commission. The process this evening will be to call for items on the agenda. The commission will hear briefly from staff first, then the applicant and/or their representative. Then we will open the public hearing and hear from those in favor and/or in opposition to the request. Before closing the public hearing, both staff, the applicant, and/or their representative will be provided an opportunity to respond and provide additional information and answer any questions that have been raised. After all interested parties have spoken, the public hearing will be closed. We will hear closing remarks and alternatives from staff. With that, the first item on the public hearing portion of the agenda tonight is a short-term rental, STR 0124.
Good evening, Planning Commission. My name is Diana Hood. I'm the Associate City Planner. And as stated, this item is a request for a short-term rental license at the address 3417 West 31st Avenue. Here is an area map of the subject property. It is located on the south side of town near 31st and Eagle Summit. Planning Commission is the hearing body for short-term rentals. The hearing will be held as a specific use permit hearing, except there is no staff report or presentation. As a reminder, the city cannot enforce private restrictions or covenants, but the Planning Commission can give weight to them as part of the deliberate process. Are there any questions for staff?
I don't see any. Thank you. At this time, we give an opportunity for the applicant to come forward and present any information.
Hello, my name is Cameron Moore. I live at 3417 West 31st Avenue. My wife and I are here seeking a short-term rental license for that same property. So that's where we live. That is our primary home. That's where we do life at. I know that sounds a little redundant that I live at my home, but I think it's significant to emphasize that for the application of a short-term rental. I work from home 5 days a week, 9 to noon, so I have a home office set up. And so I work out of my home. In the afternoons, I have meetings in Stillwater, so I have to be in Stillwater in order to fulfill my job requirements, but I'm also working out of my home in the morning. We have 4 kids, ages 5 months to 2 years, 5 years old, and then 6 years old. The 2 oldest are homeschooled. My wife homeschools them. She has to homeschool them in our home. The 2 younger ones, the 2-year-old and 5-month-old, they take naps during the day, so that she has to put them down for naps during the day as she continues to homeschool our 2 oldest boys. Our 2 oldest boys also go to school 1 day a week here in Stillwater, Mondays 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., and so that ties us to Stillwater as well. We have to be functioning in our home in order to do that. We also have community groups that come over. Sunday night we have 5:30 to 8 p.m. Where we cook a meal and invite our friends over for our community group. We do that every Sunday. So that again ties us to our house where we are preparing that meal beforehand and then also hosting people that evening. We also have another community group that meets 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. in our home Monday mornings. So as you can see, we work out of our home, we do school in our home, we have our community in our home. I think that's significant for 2 reasons with this short-term rental license. The first one being that we will have significant standards for who we allow to rent our home. The furniture is our furniture. The plates are our plates. The beds are our beds. So we will have the highest standards on who is going to come in. We want to have confidence that they will treat our home with respect, that they will treat it like it is their own, because it's our own. And we didn't order furniture online, have it sent to a different house in the community, and then put it together in one day and have never sat on the couch or slept in the bed. That is something that we use every single day. So we want to have very high standards in order to ensure that they are going to treat our property well. The second reason for the emphasis on we live in that house is that would limit the availability of our house. We have to be in there every single day. every single day of the week, so that would limit us to at least just the weekends. And even just thinking of weekends, we still have commitments on the weekends. So every single person that we would accept for a short-term rental will go through a vast filter of thinking, is this going to be worth it for us? Is this going to be something that we are comfortable uprooting our 4 kids and leaving town for a weekend in order to do? So we won't be doing it during the week, but we will have weekends available. And really our hope with it is that it would just be a few game day weekends. It would be graduation weekend and weekends that we are already leaving town for whatever reason. So it will be very limited to how many times we actually are renting it out. We had a short-term rental previously for 5 years. We had a short-term renter's license for that for all 5 years. And we did over 100 bookings in 5 years at that property. So that just shows that we have experience in this area. In those 5 years, we never got one complaint from a neighbor. There was never one issue brought up to the city. And we were able to gain so much experience through that we are confident that we can take that experience into our primary home now and be able to ensure that people are respecting our home and the neighbors around us. Just a few rules that we have in place in order to ensure that would be, number one, there's no parties. So that's a filter that is on the website. That if people are looking to host a party, they wouldn't even be able to find our house in order to request that. So no parties. Number two is a 2-night minimum stay. I've heard of stories of people renting it for 1 night and then not treating it with respect and then just skirting out the next day. We have a 2-night minimum in place. Number 3 is no local stay, so nobody from Stillwater would be able to stay in our home. Number 4 is limiting the amount of cars that can park at our house to 4. I don't even think that people would bring that many cars for reasons I'll explain in a little bit. But we're limiting that to 4. We have a 3-car garage with two areas in our garage available for people to park in, and then our driveway can hold 6 cars easily. But with the 2 available spots in our garage, the most amount of cars that people would see are 2 in the driveway. So that'll even just cut down on an eyesore of many cars, and they wouldn't need to park on the street at all or in places that they shouldn't be parking. So we can host up to 8 cars in our driveway and garage, but we're limiting it all the way down to 4. Number 5 is that we have installed quiet hours. So from 10 p.m. till 8 a.m., people cannot be outside of our house. They have to be inside. So if they're hanging out in the backyard and it becomes 10 p.m., they will be asked to be moved into the house so that it doesn't disrupt neighbors. That goes all the way till 8 a.m., so nobody's waking up super early being loud. We just want to be able to respect our neighbors during those sensitive hours through the night. Obviously, people could be hanging out in Stillwater later than 10 p.m., so the expectation would be if they're returning to our home later than 10 p.m., that they would just immediately go in the home. There would be no lingering outside. There would be no hanging out, again, just to ensure that quiet hours are respected. And then number 6 is that we are limiting the amount of people to 6 people in our house. And by doing that, that limits parties being thrown or just trying to put as many people as they possibly can into our house. And then lastly is not necessarily a rule, but it's more of just a reality. Like I said, we have 4 kids, so our house is built for kids. We have a king bed in one room. The second bedroom has 2 twin beds that come up knee high. And then for easy access for a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old to get in and out of bed. And then the third bedroom is a nursery with 2 cribs. So really, if you're thinking about 6 people staying there, 2 of them would be kids, 2 of them would be infants, and then 2 of them would be adults. If people were just wanting to have adults stay there, it would be 2 adults in a king bed, 2 adults in 2 twin beds, and then 2, there wouldn't even be room enough for the additional adults. So really what we are doing is we are offering this for families. This is a perfect opportunity for families to come into Stillwater and to be able to rent a house where the parents can stay in a king bed, a child could stay in a twin bed, and an infant can stay in a crib. And really our hope would be that you could drive through our neighborhood and you would never be able to pick out which one is the short-term rental in the neighborhood. We live there full-time. My kids ride their bikes, play on their scooters all the time outside in front of our house. Any of our neighbors would drive by and not be able to point out this is the short-term rental. They'd be able to say, no, this is where the Moores live. This is where the Moores house is. This is where the Moores do life. So thank you so much for just considering this. We would like to have this short-term rental, and again, just to be able to rent it out for a few weekends out of the year. And I'm available to answer any questions if you have any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Moore? I do have one clarifying question. You mentioned that you did have a short-term rental for 5 years. Was that here in Stillwater?
It was here in Stillwater, so all of that experience is here in Stillwater.
In the area, you know
Yep.
that you know the clientele and.
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Thank you. Do you have one?
Well, I have a lot of questions, but none of them that really apply probably to this forum. So
Okay, all right.
I'm just curious about things. That's
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Very accommodating people.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, we'd open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone else in the audience this evening that would like to speak in favor of this item. Okay. And I do have a list here. If there's anyone on this list, I'm going to start on the next name. If this is something that you would like to speak on in opposition, Jason Kirkpatrick, is this your item? Okay, please come forward. If you can state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Jason Kirkpatrick. I live at 3008 South Rocky Ridge. I received, as I assume everybody else did that lived within a 300-foot radius from the property in question, that if that application had been made and if we had an objection to it, that we were told the process to file the objection. And I did so primarily because I wanted to do some information gathering. But ultimately, in the interest of time, I have with me a couple of things. One is the owner's restrictive covenants, which I'm sure you're aware of, but number 11 states that no professional office, church, business, trade, or commercial activities of any sort may ever be conducted in a residential building in our lot. So this is the owner restrictive covenants for the Eagle Summit edition. And whenever my wife and I purchased our home, then we had to sign a planned unit development rider stating that we would abide by all of the parts of this particular covenant. So when we were searching for a place to buy, we chose Eagle Summit primarily because we assumed that it would be, based on these, a neighborhood that would be free of long-term and short-term rentals. So naturally we were surprised when that document showed up in our mail. So, I mean, I have no malice towards the Moores, none at all. I'm just stating the document that I signed and that we bought our house under the assumption that that was the way things were in that particular neighborhood. So, questions?
Yeah, you mentioned long-term rentals, so your neighborhood doesn't allow long-term rentals?
I would assume not, according to this, unless there's something that we didn't know upon buying our home in that neighborhood.
Okay.
Let me ask you this.
Okay.
The item you said that was number 11 on your restrictive covenants, and that was what was commercial activity?
Yes.
Okay, and then the renting, that was a different item? Or is that part of the commercial activity?
I would assume that falls under commercial activity. Renting is not.
Is it listed under there?
The word renting is not in this, no.
Okay. But in your restrictive covenants, does it say something? Does it in regards to renting?
Business, trade, or commercial activity is the exact
Okay.
wording.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. At this time, we'll ask if there, for the next one on the list here, Ben Burr. Oh, good.
Good evening. I'm Ben Burr. I'm at 2915 South Rocky Ridge Street, just a couple houses down from Mr. Kirkpatrick. And my wife and I were of the same assumption when we bought our home in late 2019 that short-term and long-term rentals fell under that umbrella of commercial activities. We still feel that way. We've had questions with some of our neighbors concerning the same understanding, and it seems to be a blanket statement that all of us consider commercial activity, both short-term and long-term, as a negative to our neighborhood, and no ill will towards the Moores. But my biggest complaint, honestly, is the location. And what I mean by that is they're at a corner, and there are some neighbors that like to park along that corner. Not talking about their tenants, just some of the neighbors. And the width of the street, if any of his new short-term tenants were to park on the street, there's a definite blind spot without anybody, but then it's just exacerbated by more vehicles possibly parking on the street. I know he says there's going to be restrictions, but we all live in reality. We understand that some people might not necessarily follow those restrictions, especially if there's not a watchful eye reminding them on a constant basis that those restrictions need to be upheld. Same can be said for other neighbors that we've had discussions with parking on the street, commercial properties, and what have you, as far as we have bees, so we had to kind of go through a conversation about livestock in our yard, and bees don't fall under that, so a little different, but I'm fine with people wanting to rent out their properties, just not necessarily directly in my neighborhood and directly down the street where I have to kind of drive through a blind spot repeatedly. We do have a lot of children in the neighborhood, and they don't necessarily follow the walk not in the middle of the street rules, so we don't have sidewalks in most of our neighborhoods, so just another added inconvenience, especially with it being on the weekend when kids are most of the time going to be outside. We all know how game days can be, and everybody's having a great time, so just wanted to let everybody know that. And any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. The next name on the list to speak on this item is Janet Werner.
Good evening. This is concerning Janet Werner, and I live at 708 West 11th.
Okay, were you here for the short-term rental discussion?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we've had a miscommunication. So
Okay.
on here it says that you wanted to speak on the short-term rental. You want to speak on one of the other items, the map amendment and the specific use permit later. For the subject at 716 West 11th?
Yes.
Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. I apologize.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And I know we had someone come in late, and we had a sign-in sheet if you would like to speak, so I'll give you an opportunity if you'd like to come forward and speak on this item. You want him to sign? It would help us with our record keeping if you don't mind. And now that you've written it, we're going to ask you to state it again for the record, so we're going to make double sure that you are who you are.
All right, Michael Campbell. We live at 2921 South Rocky Ridge. We're Ben's neighbor. I don't have a whole lot to say, but I will say this was tried once before in our neighborhood, and they had similar stipulations, a certain number of people, and his neighbor had to call when 20 people showed up. It was basically a party, and the gentleman did shut it down, but I'm a little afraid the same kind of thing could happen. But that's all I have.
Any questions from the commissioners? No? Okay, thank you very much. All right, at this time, we'll close the public hearing, and we will give the opportunity for the applicant, if there's anything this evening, commissioners, anything else you want to hear from the applicant to answer any questions that you've heard from the neighbors? I'm not seeing any. Okay, we'll move to the next step. All right, at this time, I'd like to, if staff could come forward and give us findings and alternatives. Well, I guess we don't have findings and alternatives, do we? I keep thinking we're on another item.
That's correct. Your options or alternatives for this item are to either approve the application, defer for additional discussion, or to deny.
All right, thank you, Diana. Commissioners, discussion or any motion?
Do we have any way of knowing for the neighborhood covenant if rentals are grouped into the business, the wording that they were speaking of earlier? Because January, you brought up that as a point, if that falls under that, and I'm curious if it does or not.
I would have to actually look at the covenants and do more research on the covenants. However, usually commercial trade or use is selling goods or services, typically. That's what that means.
So rentals would fall under that.
I'm not saying that. No, the selling of goods and services would not be rentals usually. But like I said, I don't have their covenants. I'm not their attorney. It's hard to say that, actually, having more time to look at the covenants. And just to remind you all, we cannot enforce their covenants. We can give weight to them, but we cannot enforce their covenants. Their HOA could.
So if that's a piece of additional information that commissioners would like before rendering a decision, I think that's probably something we could ask for and table this to the next meeting.
Yes, you can.
I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of that, although if we vote, we vote. But when I've done just a little bit of checking on this in the past, really, and I'm not an attorney, so typically what those covenants are directed toward is a mechanic shop out of the garage or a beautician in one room of the home. If they want to particularly limit rentals, then it's specifically called out, because it's a very generalized term to keep businesses from operating there, is typically the interpretation.
I would agree with you.
So I think the applicant has an understanding of the process, has experience with it, and certainly would be mindful of the property being taken care of, given that it's not for the purpose of short-term rentals, it's for the purpose of primarily their residents. So, based on that, I would make a motion that we approve the amendment, or approve the STR.
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote.
She's trying to.
It's not.
Okay, so I have 4 yes and 1 no choice. Is Ms. Phillips?
And
Do I hear yes?
Yes.
So we have a 5-0 vote in support of the motion.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is a map amendment, Stillwater Housing Development Corporation. It's map amendment MA 23-04. We'll hear from Jackie.
Right. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Jacqueline Porter, the City Planner, presenting the map amendment by the property owners, Stillwater Housing Development Corp., which is requesting a rezoning from RSS, which is small lot, single family residential, to 2-family and multifamily residential district at 716 West 11th Avenue. This is to allow for future multiple residential units on the subject property. Here's an area map of the subject property. It's located at the northeast portion of the intersection of Ramsey and 11th. Here's an aerial view. To the south is the Southern Woods Park with the dog park and all of its associated parking with it is adjacent to it. Here's a street view looking northeast from the intersection of South Ramsey and West 11th. The current zoning of the property is RSS. RTM is in the vicinity of the subject property and is surrounding to the north and to the east, and then to the south and the west is public for our parks. The future land use map for the comprehensive plan, the desired use of the community at the time of the comprehensive plan was adopted was low density. Roger Gose is here on behalf of the applicant. Are there any questions for staff?
Any questions for staff? I don't see any. Thanks, Jackie. At this time, we'd ask if the applicant would like to come forward or the representative.
Roger Gose, 1120 East Connell. I'm the chairman of the Stillwater Housing Development Corporation, which is owned by the Stillwater Housing Authority. It's an arm's length away from that, so we can do some things the feds won't let us do. So we'd like to build, I think, 7 or 8 small one-bedroom type housing units on here for people that need a place to live, and we would own them all. That's why we need to go to RTM, is we're not going to subdivide it, and RTM lets us put, I think, up to 20 units per the acre. That's not what we're planning on doing. And okay, we just want to put in a small housing cluster in this area. The Development Corporation would maintain it and maintain the property and the grounds. And we've got this piece of property. We'd like to do something with it instead of mow it. And the neighborhood to the east is pretty much in decline, and doesn't make a lot of sense to go in and put a big multi-bedroom house on this piece of property. It doesn't work. So that's what we're trying to do. We've been trying to find some property that we could put in this one-bedroom small units for people that need some housing. Any questions?
Any questions from the commissioners? I did have one question for you. I know that area is very low. Is it out of the floodplain, or would would the finished floor have to be raised up?
Southwest corner is in the flood plain.
Okay.
Flood fringe, not in the floodway.
Flood fringe, okay.
And so
there may have been.
in the next item, I think you may have a layout.
Actually shows the line.
That's why it's horseshoe or L'd
Gotcha.
around, and that would be remain as an open area.
Okay.
And yeah, there's a pretty good city drainage channel just to the west on the west side of Ramsey. So that's why some of that flood water happens there.
Okay. All right. That was my only question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this time, we would open up and ask if there's anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak in favor of this item. Seeing none, we'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition. And Janet Verner, I believe we've got your name on here. All right, we'll try this again.
My family and I, I didn't understand what the housing was planning on doing with the land, and it does flood there. I have 2 lots right beside that property. My house is, those 2 lots right beside the red. So that's where I live. I live at 708 West 11th, and then I own the property 706 West 11th. Okay. Those 2 lots. And one deeper in the off of 13th.
Okay.
and I didn't know what they were going to do. That's why I'm here, because I didn't want any apartments. That's what I didn't want. I mean, you know, I don't get all my wishes, but I'm sure a lot of y'all wouldn't want apartment buildings going up right next outside your window. Now, he said something about the tiny homes. Is that what you were speaking of? Not the tiny homes, the one unit resident, like a small house, one bedroom.
To the, if you want to address them to the commission, yeah, so it's, this is what was in our information, and that would be, looks like maybe 8 of these set up in an L shape on the property. And it's there's a floor plan.
Here, I can give her my copy.
Sure, yeah. We're gonna hand you a copy so you can see what we have.
Thank you. I showed
You
to
bet.
some of my neighbors that couldn't.
Sure,
have this.
you can have this one.
Okay.
So the information that we have in the packet is a plan that shows 8 units with some common green space. And it looks like of those 8 units, they're all a 1-bedroom unit. And it looks to be, I think I counted earlier when I was looking at this, I think that there's 12 parking spaces. And there are, the handicap spaces are also available. And then you can see kind of what the character is from that they're planning.
Okay. They look rather nice, make the neighborhood look good. May make my house look bad. Mine's been there since 1936. Grandpa willed it to us. He owned the land. So I guess that's all I need to know, I guess.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, at this time, we will close the public hearing and would ask for staff to please present findings and alternatives.
All right, staff's findings. The Land Development Code allows for rezoning via map amendment, 2-family and multifamily district. Zoning is located in the vicinity. The comprehensive plan calls for low-density use at the property's location. So your alternatives tonight for this item is accept findings and recommend that the City Council approve the proposed map amendment as presented, or find that the map amendment is not an appropriate use for the property based upon the impact to the surrounding vicinity and do not recommend that the City Council approve the map amendment, or you can find that additional information or discussion is needed prior to making a recommendation and table the request to a certain date.
All right, thank you. Any questions for staff? I'll make a comment. I know when I saw what's on the next item,
Yeah.
what the planned development is for the area, that I think it looks like it would be a nice addition, and it keeps, I think, the character of the scale of homes that are in the neighborhood, and looks like it would, I agree, I think it would be nice to have something in that area of town. We haven't seen any new homes in quite some time down there, so I thought it looked like it would be a positive.
No, I agree. I think it's really intelligent infill there, so.
Any other thoughts or perhaps a motion?
I'll motion to accept the findings and recommend that the City Council approve the proposed map amendment as presented.
I second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. The next item on the agenda is a specific use permit, SUP 23-06.
Yes, thank you. So this is in correlation with the map amendment. The specific use permit is to allow for conventional single-family structures in the previously approved map amendment of an RTM at the property located at 716 West 11th Avenue. Just a refresher, it's at the corner of Ramsey and 11th, and the aerial view showing that Southern Woods Park is to the south and all this parking. Street view again. Your zoning map, it was just previously approved to be RTM with RTM in the vicinity with single family adjacent. Stillwater Housing Development Corp. is proposing an 8 one-bedroom conventional single-family homes. Section 23, 139E4 allows for more than one principal resident structure in an RTM. Oh, Roger's here. Do you have any questions for staff?
Any questions for staff? All right, thanks, Jackie. All right,
I can just.
I don't know, commissioners, does anybody need to hear from the applicant? Kind of looked at this. All right. We're good. Okay. So,
Still have to open and close the hearing.
I do, yeah. So we'll open the public hearing and I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this item. Seeing none, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition of this item. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask staff to present findings and alternatives.
All right, so the findings for this item is the Land Development Code allows for the use of conventional single-family homes and two-family and multifamily districts, or RTM, with a specific use permit. Section 23, 139E4 allows for more than one principal residential structure on a lot, and the comprehensive plan calls for a low-density use at the property's location. So your options tonight on this item is accept findings and recommend that the City Council approve the proposed specific use permit as presented, or find that the specific use permit is not an appropriate use for the property based upon the impact to the surrounding vicinities and do not recommend that the City Council approve the request, or you find that additional information or discussion is needed prior to making a recommendation and table the request to a certain date.
Thank you. Commissioners, anyone entertaining a motion?
A motion to accept the findings and recommend that City Council approve the proposed specific use permit as presented.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a text amendment, TXT 22-02.
Yes. All right. The last item tonight is for a text amendment being brought to you again. Is for the Land Development Code, Chapter 23, Article 6, Land Use Classification, Division 1, General Section 23, 121, exceptions, setbacks for fences, etc., projections into the yards. The proposed text amendment was first presented to Planning Commission on February 14th. Was approved 4-1. After a Planning Commission meeting, members of the community voiced their concerns of the text and the lack of clarity of the proposed text amendment. The item was requested to be pulled from the City Council agenda, and it was. The item was originally developed by staff to address reoccurring cases presented to the Board of Adjustment in relation to the location of fences in the secondary front yard, your corner lots. So here's the necessity, kind of refresh everyone that was there and those that weren't, why they're needed. Since the beginning of 2020, 73 variances have been requested. Of the 73, 15 of them were specifically concerning fences on homes on corner lots. So that was approximately 20% of our cases that went to the Board of Adjustment. In 2020, we had 6 out of the 21. In 21, we had 5 of the 18. In 22, we had 2 of the 21. And so far this year, we've already had 2 out of the 13 variances we have received are for fences. So the current code, I'll leave it here so you can kind of see what it looks like. Staff has made some adjustments to the proposed text amendment and used work with the members of the community to help simplify and clarify the existing text. The major changes between the current code and the proposed text changes. Here's the proposed. The proposed text changes is the change of acceptance in the table to be allowed, and the clarification of the location as yards in B1 secondary yards is defined and is stated as a fence, hedge, or visual barrier 4 to 8 feet in height may extend to within 5 feet of the secondary front yard of a corner lot in a residential zone district. Are there any questions for staff?
Well, I think this addresses some of the things that I was not real thrilled about before.
Yes.
So I was happy to see this come back with a rework. So I think this is worded much better.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Questions, thoughts? Right. So, Counselor, do we need to open for public hearing on this one as well?
Yes.
All right. So we'll open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak in favor of this item. Seeing none, we'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition on this item. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask staff to present all findings and alternatives.
All right, so staff findings, the text amendment to the Land Development Code is needed to address the height limitations of fences on secondary front yards or corner lots. So your alternatives tonight for this text amendment is accept findings and recommend that the City Council approve the proposed text amendment as presented, or find that the text amendment is appropriate for the definition with identified amendments and recommend the City Council approve the request, or find that additional information or discussion is needed prior to making a recommendation and table the request to a future Planning Commission meeting, or find that the text amendment is not needed and do not recommend that the City Council approve the request.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, anyone thinking of a motion? Chair will move to approve the text amendment and recommend for approval by the City Commission as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda are miscellaneous items from staff, planning commissions of city attorney for discussion and possible action. The only item that we have on the agenda is that the next planning commission meeting is September 19th, which will be next week, which is a little unusual. Usually we get more of a break, but it's just next week. And the last item on the agenda is...
I got
You got one more?
Yes.
All right, we got an impromptu.
So,
All right.
Yes, exciting news. Last night, City Council approved our contract with Freese & Nichols Incorporated, so we will be working on our comp plan and code diagnostic. So we will be starting that soon. So be on the lookout. We'll be starting to send out surveys and advertising for this comp plan. So it's exciting.
Very exciting. It's wonderful news.
Yes, that's all I
Yay.
have.
Woohoo. All right, good deal.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote. Motion passes 5-0. We stand adjourned.